Here's Danielle Smith on 770 CHQR.
Brought to you by the Popowich Carmeli Advisory Group, CIBC Wood Gundy.
Oh, good. I'm glad you guys liked that story. I thought you were thinking it was a little off the beaten track for me, but don't you love Reverend Fred? I would love to have our own Reverend Freds here. And if you know of a Reverend Fred in and around our area, let me know, because I just think that those are such important stories. Because as I said, I think men need something different when they're trying to seek connection. It's not sitting around talking about their feelings, right? It's sitting around doing something. And if you happen to share something that you care about deeply, then you build a connection that way. And it's also, in the past, we just used to have more ways to get together to do something. Barn raisings, I guess, is what I think of in reading about the old pioneer times. And there just don't seem to be that many opportunities to do that anymore. So I just love the fact that they're recreating that and building community and answering something deep within each person's need as well for something beyond the present, something beyond politics, of course. All right, so now let's get back to politics. After that little interlude, feel-good interlude. And there's so much going on in the Senate that I thought I would bring in Senator Doug Black again to talk to us about it. I was just talking to him off the air, and I said, isn't it amazing that we actually now have an effective Senate? After all the work that Burt Brown did, plowing into his field, the Triple E signs so we can get an equal elected and effective Senate. Doug Black, of course, is one of our elected senators. That didn't end up succeeding in doing the transformational change. I think it was part of it, but we now talk more about what the Senate is doing and how they're modifying bills and meaningful tours that they're doing across the country and meaningful initiatives that they're taking on than I think we ever have before. So I just think that is I think that's good for our democracy. And I think it's good that we have that change. And I think my guest is a lot of the reason for that. Senator Black, thanks so much for being with me.
Good morning. It's hard to follow a reverend, Danielle.
I know it is, but I have to say, in your own way, you've been preaching a message too, and being very effective about it as well. So there's two things I want to talk to you about, because there's a couple of news stories saying that there was it looked like there was a bit of a maneuver to try to shut down and impose deadlines on a bunch of the bills that we care about. And it sounds like that ended up getting derailed. And then it also sounds like you might have the ability to investigate the SNC-Lavalin issue on a special committee. So I want to talk about both of those. But let's first talk about what was going on with these bills. Because in the past, it would have been rubber stamp, rubber stamp, rubber stamp. Right. All of a sudden, royal assent and everything is law. What's different this time?
Well, what's different this time is the Senate has a view that when legislation comes to us, it's not in the interest of Canadians, we're going to make amendments. And in the old days, that just was not allowed. It didn't work. I'm not so sure it's going to work in the new days, but I can tell you, myself and my colleagues are working hard on legislation, whether it's 69 or the tanker ban 48, to say, look, that's not good enough. We got to improve it. And that's what's happening. What the government endeavored to do is they're very keen, as they should be, I guess, to get their agenda through. So they came in with tactics that I think were pretty heavy-handed to say, oh, that's fine, have your conversations, but by this date we want this done. Well, that doesn't work. We're not assembling cars here, Danielle. We're not on an assembly line and doing what needs to be done. What we're doing is trying to make the laws better for Canadians. And I'm sorry, if it's done by May 9th, great. If it takes till May 29th, that's great too. I want to get it right.
Do you think that there's a chance that these bills will be carried over until after the election? I think that Rick Peterson, for instance, from Suits and Boots, one of the things that he hoped would give the government a bit of a way out was that if you, or maybe it was, there are people who are trying to find creative ways to press reset on this. And one of the suggestions was to put these two bills together and to hoist them. I know that that's sort of a technical term of what happens in Parliament, but the effect of it would be that it wouldn't pass in this session. We'd have another election, have some time to rethink it, and then come back. Is there any chance that's likely to happen?
I don't think so, because the government's not interested in it. On C-69, the bill to redo resource regulation in Canada, and 48, the tanker ban, which is a direct aim at Alberta, the government, for whatever reason, seems very intent in driving them forward. In fairness, I and other senators are leading a pretty aggressive charge to try and amend 69 in a way that works for industry in Alberta. But you know, Danielle, if we can't be successful, if we can't get a package of amendments that the government agrees with, hoist is not good enough for this bill. This needs to die.
Okay.
We have to try.
Yes.
We have to try. But if we can't be successful, you know, when Parliament rises in June, everything dies on the order paper, and I'm going to stand up and applaud that.
Well, if we get to that point, other than, I mean, I suppose they still have the numbers to be able to push it through the Senate. Interestingly, where can you tell us about where our other Alberta senators are at on this? Because there have been a few recent appointments. We know that Grant Mitchell, the Liberal lead, is the one who's advancing it, so it's pretty clear where he's coming down on it. But what are you finding with the other senators?
Well, for sure, Senator Tanis and Senator McCoy from Calgary, Senator Tanis from High River, are very, very strongly against C-69. And I can tell you our two new senators from Edmonton, Senator Simons and Senator Laboucan-Benson, are very much in favor of Alberta's interests because they're very new. They're just trying to figure out exactly what that looks like. But I have every reason to think that at the end of the day, they're going to be strong supporters of Alberta's position. All
right. Now, tell us what's happening with Bill C-69, because there's some hearings coming up.
C-69, as your audience knows, is the bill where basically all approvals for natural resource projects in Canada will be redesigned. People here in Calgary and Alberta call it the No Pipelines Bill. We've heard unbelievable testimony from all interests across Canada. We've heard from 8 governments. We've heard from 3 territories. People say this bill is bad. It's going to stop the Canadian economy in its tracks. I pushed very, very hard starting last October in my initial speech in the Senate on this to say, look, we can't sit in Ottawa and wait for people to come to us and tell us how they're going to be hurt. We got to get out. So to the committee's credit, they're getting out. They're in Vancouver today, Calgary tomorrow, Fort Mac on Wednesday, then Saskatoon, Winnipeg, and then the East Coast the week after.
How can people participate in Calgary, or did you have to already sign up?
Oh, yeah, totally. There's a process, and there's just tremendous lineup of witnesses tomorrow, starting at 8, going right through to about 5 tomorrow afternoon. And I think other people will be heard. I understand that, you know, some people are going to come down to where the venue is and let their point of view be known. And I think that's very important, so long as it's done respectfully, because it's so critical that the senators understand that this is key to Canadian development. It's key to Alberta, and there's no coming back from this. If we pass this legislation, our competitive position will be further diminished. Investment will continue its flight from this province, from this country. We will continue to lose jobs, and frankly, the rest of the world will look at us and think we have had too much marijuana.
Why? And in some cases, people might be accurate on that. What is it though that keeps on driving this one forward? Is it because they want the ability at the end of a process to have Catherine McKenna come down and say, oh, notwithstanding everything you've done, I'm canceling it because Greenpeace contacted me? Or is it genuinely that the Mining Association has said that they're fine with it? So they have to assume, well, if the Mining Association can bring themselves to be fine with it, then all the other industries should be fine with it.
When you step back from it, it is because the environmental lobby in Canada, my bias, funded by American interests, has captured the flag. They own the powers of position, from the former Jerry Butts to Catherine McKenna's chief of staff. These are individuals who have an intense belief that we're damaging the world. And we in Canada must fix that. I'm not judging that. Many people believe that, and that they're entitled to believe that. But they have completely forgot that there's a balance that needs to be achieved. 69 does not talk about economic considerations when you approve a pipeline. Like, how is that possible? They don't consider taxes, jobs. They consider the environment, our ability to meet our commitments to the Paris Accords, the intersection of sex and gender. You can't make this up, Danielle. And that's why I have been fighting so intensely for so long now to cause people to understand this is not in our national interest. People are starting to get it.
Well, I hope that your colleagues...
People are getting.
I hope your colleagues get the message tomorrow. Tell us what also happened with C-48, because it was sort of shocking that the bill is essentially a ban on Alberta bitumen exports.
You bet.
That's all it is, and yet they weren't even going to do any hearings from the Senate in Alberta about it.
Well, that is actually very, very hard to believe. Again, I pushed extremely hard. I thought not only should they visit British Columbia and Alberta, I thought they should visit New Brunswick and Newfoundland to see how oil is handled on water. It's very easy to sit in Toronto and Montreal and think, oh my God, the risk. But I wanted people to see that on the Grand Banks of Newfoundland, which are wild seas, that you can handle this safely. Nonetheless, this government is committed to the only oil ban in the world. The only oil ban in the world. And it's aimed at stopping production of our oil sands. Full stop. I am hopeful at the end of the day, senators are going to see through this.
Are they going to have hearings now based on the pressure?
Again, they were going to go to British Columbia, and frankly, I took a very, very strong position publicly and said, how do you study half a file? Like, how do you do that? So long story short, they have now decided last week to go to Edmonton and I believe a couple of places in Saskatchewan. So I stand up and applaud and congratulate the committee for stepping back from a decision which was simply not the right decision.
Well, and you're so right. Go to Atlantic Canada and see how they've been able to manage far more tanker movements safely. You would think...
Or Montreal.
But again, that's why you wonder what the agenda is. If the agenda is trying to get to the bottom of how to balance the environment and economic development, that doesn't appear to be the case with the process they've chosen.
The agenda is to cap the oil sands. If they could close the oil sands tomorrow, it's a day too late.
Okay,
that's my view.
Let me take a pause. So Senator Black is working on your behalf and making incremental strides. So the question will be whether or not these bills become law at the end of June. So we'll keep watching that. But I also want to ask him about the SNC Lavalin case as well, whether or not the Senate can do anything to get to the bottom of that one. We'll continue our discussion right after this on 770 CHQR.
I would find there another road.
Guys, I don't mean to make you feel this way. I've got someone saying, I'm listening to the senator and it almost makes me physically ill. Our country has been hijacked by these special interest groups, useful idiots for other countries to step in and steal our markets. That's why you guys responded when Zach did that segment with Bob Ivora not so long ago, identifying, I think, 23 different ministries where people who have this strong environmental background, that's their number one issue, have now entered into virtually every ministry at the federal level. It's having an impact. And you heard what the senator said about what the ultimate agenda is. It ain't to get pipelines built. So let's talk about the next one, SNC-Lavalin, because we always watch in the U.S. whenever there's a scandal. Mm-hmm. You have the big Senate hearing or the big House of Representatives hearings. We don't see those very often here. We've seen Justice Committee get shut down. We've seen the Ethics Committee get shut down. What is it that the Senate can do? What's being contemplated here?
Well, Danielle, to your earlier point, it's because the Senate is empowered now. When we didn't have independence, there is no way a senator could possibly stand up and propose that there would be an investigation as is being proposed now. And I'm now speaking not as an Alberta senator, I'm speaking as a lawyer. This matter needs to be understood. I'm not saying anyone did, but you cannot even have the suggestion that the governmental branch is interfering with the prosecutorial branch. You cannot have it in a democracy. And if there's any suggestion of that, we need to understand. And if there's not, we need to clear the air. So I'm a big supporter that there should be an investigation. The House Justice Committee should have looked at this. I don't know what they were thinking. That's their obligation. That's their job. One more time, the House of Commons, for whatever reason, has decided not to fulfill their responsibilities. My view is the Senate needs to step up here.
What do you think the grave danger is? I read a really good commentary on this over the weekend, and one person said, well, if it becomes known that all you have to do is hire a bunch of high-powered lawyers and the ex-clerk of the Privy Council, and you can get criminal proceedings against you quashed, then everybody's going to do that.
That's corruption. That is corruption. I mean, that's how a lot of the world works, and we are run by a state of law. It's just absolutely, that's dead on arrival. If there's any suggestion of that, then the boom's got to be lowered. And at this moment in time, I don't know whether that happened or not. And all I'm saying, I'm not prejudging anything. All I'm saying is, let's figure out what actually did happen. Not what's being spun, not what's not being spoken about. Let's just stick to the facts. What are the facts? And then when we get the facts, then people can judge, is this inappropriate? Or is this not inappropriate?
Do you think, in some ways, we might not be able to get all of the facts because everything seems to hinge on this Section 13 review that the Director of Prosecutions gave that said, here are all the reasons why SNC-Lavalin does not qualify for a deferred prosecution agreement. I don't know how we can get to a point where we can have full information without then ruining the prosecution's case, because I'm assuming some of that briefing note will go into the challenge, right?
I don't think we're not entitled to get information as to the thought process of the Director of Public Prosecutions. We are entitled to understand whether politicians tried to direct or influence or instruct that. I mean, whether we like it or whether we don't, the Director of Public Prosecutions and the Attorney General are, in that sense, a law unto themselves. They own the law, and their job is to protect it and enforce it. And they cannot be influenced. They cannot be threatened. They cannot be threatened. And if they are, potentially that's a criminal matter as well. But we don't need to get into that. We just need to understand, did the Prime Minister and his colleagues act inappropriately? And if they acted inappropriately, there it is. If they didn't act inappropriately, well, then let's just drive on. But now we have this drip, 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 which is distracting in terms of what we need to be doing in this country.
When you look at the requirements for a deferred prosecution agreement, do you think SNC-Lavalin qualifies for one?
I understand there is an express restriction that you cannot, that economic factors do not factor into that. I've never looked at that in that detail. If that is an express factor, then SNC-Lavalin does not qualify. But my caveat is I haven't dug into that in any detail. But listen, the law is the law, and if that's the law, It's got to be good enough for Danielle, it's got to be good enough for Doug, and it's got to be good enough for SNC-Lavalin.
Prosecutors can sometimes make mistakes.
They can make mistakes, absolutely.
So what if she's made a mistake?
If she has made a mistake, then the appeal from her would be the Attorney General. She reports to the Attorney General. And in this case, the former Attorney General, who was her boss, has indicated very clearly that she thinks she's not made a mistake. She said, I've looked at the files, I've had briefings, I've had meetings, and I accept the Director of Public Prosecution's point of view. So she went to her boss says, I accept what you've said.
So now we've got a new Attorney General, David Lametti. He looks at the same set of facts and comes to a different conclusion. Is that going to have validity with the public?
No, but he can do that.
He can do that, and it'd be perfectly legal.
Absolutely. But people are going to look and say, I don't think so, is my guess. And at the end of the day, let's not lose sight of the fact that SNC-Lavalin had their troubles a number of years ago. But this is a great Canadian company that is being dragged through the mud. So that's not in Canada's interest either. So let's get the doggone thing resolved. And if the House and the Prime Minister are not prepared to resolve it, then the Senate should try and resolve it.
So what's the process that we would go through? What should we be looking for to see whether or not? Because what happened with those other two committees is they got voted down by the majority Liberals.
They did. There's a motion in the Senate that was introduced last week to strike a special committee, and that'll be debated this week.
All right. We'll look forward to seeing it.
We'll see what happens. But I mean, we're trying. We'll see.
All right. Well, thank you for your efforts. I do appreciate it. And thanks for being here.
As always, it's great to be here. Thanks so much, Danielle.
And that is our duly elected senator from Alberta. Very few of them in the sitting in the red chamber. Doug Black giving us a bit of an update on what they're up to. Now it's time for you. 403-974-8255. We will take your calls when we get back after news on 770 CHQR.